Let's start by, first of all, talking a little bit about you, your background. You're a professional photographer.
Ended up in Omaha, went to a bar called the Mac. Probably get me a job as a waiter or something like that. Lo and behold, the man was Larry King. I had no idea who he was. It was just a whirlwind. He had all this money and power. And within a couple days, I was off on a private jet.
When you say important people, Rusty, are you talking about political?
It went all the way up to the White House. These people were leaders of industry. They were doing things that I did not feel was right. Who would you go tell? Because they pulled the puppet strings. There was one instance where Colonel Michael Aquino came to a motel room, and he got from Larry King a suitcase, and it was filled with bearer bonds and cash. There was millions of dollars in that thing. It was for the Iran-Contras. Embassy Row in Washington, D.C. They had parties there. On the surface, they looked like all up and up. Then the party was over with, and there'd be a few guys that would stay after. They would have a sex party. This was at King's house.
Okay. How could this man afford Learjets, lavish parties, and also renting a mansion on Embassy Row in D.C.?
He would prime client. Prey would be a better word for it. Mm-hmm. They went to this church and hit him up for $1.8 million. Well, there was a set of nuns that he got a bunch of money from, a couple $1 million. There was Boys Town and various other organizations. Everybody doesn't know what goes on at Boys Town.
As I recall, Rusty, the Boys Town was one of King's primary recruiting grounds for young boys and girls.
Very much so. I believe the man who's running it now is Father Val Peter. Not a good choice.
Okay. Why is that?
He was up to his elbows in this. What they were doing is providing sexual favors to
whoever had money or political influence.
King told them to. Usually it was done for the purpose of compromising somebody. It didn't take me very long to figure out that they had two sets of books going. I knew that was wrong. One of the things that really made me worry about how to get out was the fact that I'd seen Robert Wadman.
He was the chief of the Omaha Police Department.
Yes.
Wadman was pretty deeply involved in abuse of the kids, was he not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the girls that he frequented was Alicia Owen.
Okay. I do remember that Alicia Owen's allegation was that Chief Wadman had made her pregnant.
He covered up so much stuff. You know, Larry flew little kids all over the country for people to be sex toys for people with perverse needs.
You know, I heard that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 80 people.
He got kids from all over the country. A lot of them came from Boys Town or orphanages or places to where they'd really not be missed. He also cataloged kids. He'd pick them to order.
Okay. It became known popularly as the Franklin Coverup, and Senator John DeCamp, a state senator in Nebraska, was on the banking committee, as was Senator Lauren Schmidt. This started out as a banking investigation into the Franklin Credit Union, which was being directed at the time by a man named Larry King, not the Larry King of talk show fame, but a gentleman who apparently was very big in Republican politics, not only at the state level, but he sang at the inauguration of I think it was Reagan, wasn't it?
It was 1984 and 88.
84 and 88. And he was also head of the Black Republican Caucus. This guy was a mover and shaker in Republican politics. And what started out as a banking investigation quickly led into this area of human trafficking, prostitution, pornography, and drugs, I think, as I understand it as well. And more. And more. And now what's going on here is King was arrested and ultimately charged with embezzlement and not anything at all to do with all of this other stuff. So what we're doing now is we're kind of talking about the real action that was going on here. Let me ask you this. You were talking about him paying Wadman, Chief Wadman of the Omaha Police Department, who, by the way, is long gone from there, as I understand it.
He's out teaching law in Utah.
Yeah. Where was King getting $50,000 a week to pay Wadman?
Well, he was making his money supposedly off these restaurants and that. But what he was doing is he would hit up these churches or whoever else, and he'd tell them to write it to account number 888888.
Okay.
Which was his account.
His account, okay.
he would pay the interest on it to whoever the group was or the person investing it.
Right.
And when it came time to renew it, if nothing else worked, he'd offer him 1/4 or 0.5% more interest.
Did any of this other money that he was paying Wadman, did any of it come from other criminal activities?
I don't doubt one bit. It was nothing unusual for Larry King to have $1 million on his American Express card in a month.
Wow.
And pay it off. And the way Larry put it was, this is so bizarre that nobody will ever believe you if you told them.
Mm-hmm.
When I got into this, I had no idea. I thought I was working for somebody legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that I realized that it was not on the up and up, it was to the point to where what I'd seen would have probably brought me in as an accessory, even though I had no involvement in it.
Yeah.
Who do you go tell?
Right.
Because, you see the chief of police taking money. He's rubbing elbows with all these powerful people. He had a daycare center in Omaha that he ran as a nonprofit.
Are you talking about King?
Yeah, Larry King did.
Okay.
And the guy that owned the building got wind of what Larry was doing and basically boarded up the doors.
What was Larry doing at the daycare center?
Oh, he was finding kids.
Okay.
And he would go rent them out, whether it be for himself or for others.
How did they get that past the parents, for example?
A lot of them were orphaned street kids. He'd say, well, my son's having a party, a sleepover, or something like that. His wife, her parents were doctors in where else but the Cayman Islands.
Oh, boy.
Okay, there's 2 places left in the world where you can hide money, and that's Belize and the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
So basically that's where a lot of the money ended up going.
What were you involved in?
Well, I was his photographer, and I shot the parties. He would have these $5,000 and $10,000 a plate fundraisers. He had me made over. One morning he spent $4,800 on clothes for me.
Yeah.
And he went as far as to have my hair cut, colored, and permed by Nancy Reagan's hairdresser.
Okay.
$2,000 hairdo.
Wow.
Yep. Didn't blink an eye at it. The things that I was shooting would be these parties. Lo and behold, he had another photographer that was shooting the kiddie porn, the gay porn, the snuff films.
Snuff films.
I did say snuff films. That's where they would actually kill somebody.
Okay.
And have it on film. They would sell the tape to these wealthy business people for tremendous amounts of money. This is where I got approached on various occasions to do these things, and I wanted no part of them. And one person of which was the late Hunter Thompson.
Really? So Hunter Thompson approached you about doing a snuff film?
Yep.
Okay.
He was introduced to me by Larry King, and he offered me $100,000 to shoot a snuff film. Or actually, Larry offered it to me, but it was through him.
Yeah.
Larry really pressured me to do it, and I wouldn't do it. And he had this other photographer who was doing these things for him. And I saw the other photographer on 3 different occasions. One of them, I even got to go talk to him. The guy had the same build that I had, pretty much, a little bit slighter, but he just happened to have the same curly, dark hair that mine had been made up to be.
What do you attribute that to?
What they were doing...
Are they framing you?
Yes. I was their scapegoat. They were passing me off at the parties where the families and all the attention was at. He would have one party that was the social gathering. You bring the wife, sometimes even the kids. Then after that, there would be a few people that would stick around or come back, and they would have a separate party. And that was these sex parties. Your wildest dreams and worst nightmares. Yes, that's what went on.
Wow.
They would get these kids from the street. He'd offer them a life, and they didn't realize that he was going to take the president.
Which president was it?
Reagan.
Reagan?
Had been there.
Okay.
And I'd seen the Bushes. There were various people that I'd seen. The one that's sitting in the White House right now.
Okay.
I would not trust that man with anything. He's a snake in the grass.
Okay.
lo and behold on that, sorry to inform you people that like him, but if you knew what I knew about him.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of these things that went on, and it was really a shame because you couldn't get anything done about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing is, you know, if you told somebody, you may be telling the wrong person.
Yeah.
And it would leak out, leak up, whatever, and you may find yourself dead. You may find family members dead,
Mm-hmm.
hurting, whatever. I've been shot at 3 times. I was riding my bike in Portland, Oregon, and I got intentionally hit by a car. They drove by about 50 mile an hour and opened their back door and hit me.
Wow.
Okay, I got epilepsy out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this is what I have to deal with.
Yeah.
And that just because I went to work for somebody in good faith.
Yeah.
And ended up seeing way more than I ever wanted to or dreamed of.
Mm-hmm. How many children or young people that were involved in this, how many of them do you think were utilized in snuff films? Was there a lot done, or was this something that was a rare occasion?
It happened, but the thing was I have no idea how many actually got made.
Mm-hmm.
Because they would go to so many different places. It was nothing unusual for Larry to be on a private jet 2, 3, 4 days out of a week.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he could be anywhere. And, you know, some of these things were cloaked in secrecy because a lot of them were instigated out of SAC. That's the Air Force Base in Omaha. That's Strategic Air Command.
What did they have to do with it?
That's where a lot of the MK Ultra things went on, the mind control.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about that, because when you say the mind control, you know, now how familiar were you with Paul Benassi?
I testified at his trial
Mm-hmm.
against Larry King, where he won the $1 million judgment.
This is the civilian lawsuit that Benassi filed against him, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I think it's February 5th of 1999 in Judge Warren Urban's court.
Okay.
You know, I knew Paul. I wasn't really close to him.
Yeah.
But, you know, I knew of him. That's pretty much the way most of the people I knew in Larry's organization, I knew of them, but I didn't want to get close to any of them.
Right, okay.
A lot of the kids were brought in. They were either drugged or they'd take them through this MK Ultra
Mm-hmm.
and do the mind control. Larry was very good at that.
Now, and you say that the SAC base, Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, that was a facility where they took these kids?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Air Force Base, because I know Paul Benassi talked, quite extensively about stuff that he'd been through. He was also, from what I understand, the psychiatrist that looked at him. He was himself a multiple personality, had been traumatized, and these compartmentalized personalities had been set up in him from when he was just a child. He claimed that he had been taken to Offutt Air Force Base, did he not?
Yeah. When I was with Larry and we went out to Offutt, what struck me funny was he would go right through the guard shack. They didn't stop him for anything. Didn't matter who he had with him.
Okay, so it kind of implies that he was well known there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Rusty, in your time with him around Larry King, did you ever see or know about any kind of cooperation that he may have had with any kind of government agencies, i.e. CIA or any of these other agencies that might be involved in some kind of covert activity?
Oh, yeah. You know, Michael Aquino was a colonel in, Army or...
He was in the Army.
He had various ties to, like you said, the CIA
Mm-hmm.
and the FBI, things like that.
Yeah.
Getting back to that daycare center I was telling you about,
Yeah.
the guy boarded up the doors,
Mm-hmm.
and we were on a private jet to Washington, and he called Wadman, and it was beyond his hands by that time, and the sheriffs, he called them trying to get it opened up. They didn't want to touch it. State Patrol didn't want to touch it, so he was upset,
Mm-hmm.
and he called Reagan direct, and I sat there and listened to the phone call,
Yeah.
and I could hear because I was just right next to him, and it was open within 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he had the juice.
Oh, he had the juice.
Mm-hmm. King was also involved in kidnapping.
Oh, yeah.
What knowledge do you have of that?
They'd have what they'd call catalog kids.
Mm-hmm.
they would basically just go out driving around looking for kids. And they would take pictures of them and go to these wealthy, influential people and say, would you be interested in this one or that one or the next one? And they would basically go snatch them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened to Johnny Gosch.
So Johnny Gosch was definitely part of this orbit in his selection and kidnapping.
Yeah.
All right. What was done with Johnny? Do you know what was done with him?
He was basically made into a sex slave.
Yeah.
Put him down like in a basement or somewhere and hide him out of the way and get them moved from one place to another. It gets to the point to where when you have a captive person, they're angry and frustrated at first, so they basically confine them or drug them.
Yeah.
And then they get to the point to where this person is craving personal interaction.
Right.
To where there's no other people around but the people who have made them captive.
Right.
And they get to the point to where they actually start liking the person.
Kind of like the Stockholm Syndrome, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they know this when they take these kids.
Yeah.
It's a psychological game. The military uses this a lot to where the MK Ultra and things like that, they have ways to actually split a personality. Paul Bonacci, if I remember right, he has 13 different personalities. I've seen a few of them. It's bizarre because you're sitting here, you're talking to this person, and it's a whole other person you're talking to.
Yeah.
But yet it's the same body. It's kind of eerie, actually.
Yeah. Let's talk about the investigation itself and some of the stuff that went on with DeCamp and Senator Schmidt. Gary Caradori, who was a retired Nebraska highway patrolman, went into private investigative work, was hired by the committee to investigate this stuff. Caradori died in a plane crash. What do you know about that, and what do you know about some of these photographs that allegedly exist concerning very important people?
They were mine.
Oh, they were?
Yes.
Okay, what were they photographs of?
They were photographs showing various kids being with these influential people, enough so to where it would prove that if they were missing or something, that where they were at, and get a lot of questions going. Okay. And raise a lot of eyebrows.
Okay.
There was names, there was dates to go with the faces.
Okay.
And that's what was on the plane. I was very reluctant about working with him.
Were you the contact that he flew to Chicago to meet?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the first time I've said anything publicly about that.
All right.
I'm probably one of the last people to see him live.
You delivered what to him? He flew up with his 8-year-old son on the plane to. He flew up to Chicago with his 8-year-old son on the plane.
Yes.
Met with you.
I gave him pictures, dates, places, my memoirs. While I was going through this, I was meticulous about keeping notes.
I'd imagine for your protection.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
I used to keep a diary. It was an assortment of things that would tie in a lot of people. For instance, what I've been told, there are 23 children that have been to the White House very quietly. The after-hours tours, yes, they do have them. And the kids that would go there would never be seen again. And they may go a few times or that, but it was all hush-hush. Yeah. When they were done with them, it was done.
And you never saw them again?
Nope.
Can you speculate on what you think might have happened to them?
I would bet they're probably with the fishes.
In DeCamp's book, I think he references the fact that you'd made a statement that something about for photographs, I guess, or the knowledge that you had, some people would die if they didn't get their hands on those photographs or something to that effect.
Oh yeah. Some people have died because of my photographs. I feel very badly about that.
Yeah.
Gary Caradori and his son. I believe his son was like 10 years old, Brian.
Yeah.
And Gary had no idea what he was getting when I came up, and I didn't want him anywhere near where I was at. So we met in Chicago.
Yeah.
And what was really strange about this is his plane supposedly, quote, quote, broke apart over Aurora, Illinois.
Yeah.
which happens to be the town where Chief Wadman happened to be the police chief after he was run out of Omaha.
Really?
Yes.
So Caradori's plane comes down over Aurora, Illinois. I remember it crashes into a farmer's field.
Yep.
Photographs and everything are blowing all over the place, and the police show up, FBI shows up, and everything is confiscated, and the farmer is threatened.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The deputy got out there, and he was there only a couple minutes, and the FBI shows up.
Uh-huh.
And they flat out threatened him. And they told him, you did not see anything, you do not tell anybody, you keep it quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about a year later, he started to talk about it a little bit. His wife was murdered.
Really?
Yeah.
Good heavens. So, wow. This is an incredible... How much did Satanism play into the picture there? Was that a big part of it? What was it all about?
A lot of that centered around Michael Aquino. The Omaha World Herald was run by Harold Anderson.
Okay.
He had a farm place outside of Omaha, and they would go out and have various things out at that farm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're talking about ritualistic kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some of the kids were brought out there, the ones that were kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that farmhouse played an important role.
So you'd surreptitiously shoot photographs?
Yes, I
Okay.
would do it for the purpose of basically having to protect my own butt. That's what Gary Caradori got killed over, was those pictures. The pictures I was getting were to get basically who's who and what's what.
Mm-hmm.
The kids they'd get them tutored up, and boys on boys, old men with boys. Occasionally they'd have girls. It was a lot of times the younger ones.
What about Warren Buffett?
Warren was in more than he would like to be known.
Yeah. Because I know DeCamp, his name shows up in DeCamp's book.
Yeah.
And, of course, everybody knows who Warren Buffett is.
Yep.
But he was involved in this level of this kind of stuff that was going on?
Yeah. You know, there's a few things going on right now that I personally know of that for investigations and things like that I cannot disclose. You will be hearing some things come in the very near future.
Okay. All right.
That are major.
Major?
Major.
Can you comment on what area they may be major in?
The who's who. The people who were involved in it, there's going to be heads roll. It goes way, way, way high.
Mm-hmm.
I probably said more than I should have at this point on that. People can look forward to a few things coming
Okay.
in the near future.
All right. Let's spend a little bit of time now talking about when you departed.
I was out in Washington, D.C., and Larry had sold me for the night. I was up in my room, and a guy walks in, and he came over to get friendly and friendlier, and I go, well, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, oh, well, Larry sold you to me for the night. And I'm going, what? And he says, yeah, you're mine. And I said, well, let me go freshen up, you know, and I went in the bathroom, and luckily I'd left my clothes in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up crawling out and going to the airport. I left camera equipment and everything behind.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Larry had provided me with an apartment where somebody supposedly committed suicide, but I would bet more strongly it was murder from what I'd heard later on.
Mm-hmm.
That was another one of those Wadman cover-ups.
Mm-hmm.
I went to an abandoned farmhouse. Well, this was in probably around June of '88.
Okay.
They raided the credit union. You know, Larry had a lot of power, and from what I was told, when he got out on parole, he was paroled to Washington, D.C., and went to work for the National Republican Party.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've heard, too.
So, this Franklin deal blew up, big in the news and that. I was an innocent bystander that saw too much.
Right.
I feared for my life, so I just kept out of sight. And I made the mistake of telling somebody who I thought was a friend where I was at. And he happened to have been an informant. Next thing I know, here comes the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and Dad got their house raided, not once, but twice.
Right. What were they looking for?
Basically, I think it was more of a harassment. I was living a couple miles away,
Mm-hmm.
and Mom told them where I was at. She thought it was, the FBI, there's got to be good people, this and that and the next thing, and she had no idea what all was going on. Here comes the FBI in. They raided my house. They didn't even look. They just tore the stuff up.
What I'm concerned about is whether or not you had any inkling or suspicions that there were higher level law enforcement officials who were, somewhat involved in this, covering it up.
Oh, I knew that from day one. They would be doing damage control on this something fierce. Most of what I had, most people did not know that I had. But just the fact that I had been there left a loose end. I thought I was lucky to get out of there with my life.
What happens after that? I mean, after they raid the house, what happens to you?
I basically went to living in my van. I traveled all over the country. I didn't stay hardly anywhere more than about 3 weeks.
Rusty, have you ever been threatened with your life about talking about this or anything like that?
Numerous times. People who would basically come out of the blue and just start talking. They wouldn't introduce themselves, and then it was basically keep your mouth shut. People will die.
Why do you think that there's never been an investigation on this particular aspect of the Franklin business? None of this has ever been brought to light as far as any kind of grand jury or trial. Why do you think that is?
Too much juice. That's been the biggest problem, is a lot of these people are above the law. That may be changing soon.
Okay, let's bring it up to this Jeff Gannon thing. As most people know, Jeff Gannon was in the White House Presidential Press Corps. He was there on day passes, mere feet from the President, George W. Bush. Softball's a question. The media, other media constituents around him decide, well, let's find out who this guy is. They dig into his past. They find out that he was running a gay military escort service in the D.C. area. Now we've got people that are talking about the idea that Johnny Gosch may be Jeff Gannon. Do you think he is Johnny Gosch?
I'd put my money on it.
You would?
I met with Johnny out in Portland. This has been a couple years back. And there was something that was mentioned that was, wouldn't it be funny if somebody could get into the White House or, the press corps or whatever.
What would be his motive for doing this?
Somewhat retaliation.
So kind of a payback.
Yeah. They put him through hell. That's plain and simple. They ruined this kid's life.
Yeah.
I know what he'd said about being found out. He didn't want to be known as, what everybody thought he was. He'd been forced into a life that was not what he'd normally have been in. They didn't want to be remembered like that. This was a way that he could get in and make it somewhat better. They swept it under the rug pretty quick. They're trying to get this quieted down. There's good reason for it.
This Gannon thing blows open the latter part of January. Sometime shortly after that, Hunter Thompson supposedly commits suicide. And, of course, Noreen mentions a guy named Paul Bishop that was arrested in the D.C. area for manufacturing child pornography. And then Gannon comes back after he disappears for a while. And the first article that he posts on his website is Fear and Loathing in the Media. What's your take on Hunter Thompson's suicide?
I don't think it was suicide.
Why do you think he would have been murdered? Does it have something to do with this?
I believe it does.
In what way?
It would be the snuff films. There's a very good chance that he's holding it over somebody. And the somebody just decided that it's easier to get rid of him than to give in. I was on a private jet that landed outside of Las Vegas.
Nothing out there but military installations.
Yeah, it's called Area 51. Well, we landed out there. There was a group of people came. There were a couple Arabic, and they just shuttled the kids off the plane. They weren't quite coherent. I'm sure they'd been drugged.
Yeah.
And they basically went out and brokered these kids.
Have you ever, in your experience, been to the Bohemian Grove?
Yes.
What goes on there?
Well, everybody thinks your laws and that are made in Washington, D.C. Sorry to inform you, but most of them are done in Bohemian Grove.
Would it be fair to say that a lot of the clientele have connections to Bohemian Grove?
Yes, that would be very true. It's a very elite group of people. It's a very private place. They have their own security, and they are very good about keeping it secure. This is a place where some of the satanic things go on.
Parts of this have never been made public. And Rusty, I want to thank you again for coming on the program and telling your story.
Well, thank you.
It's quite an incredible story, and of course, it does corroborate a lot of what people are hearing about, some of this stuff. A lot of people think that when Larry King was arrested and put in jail, this whole thing was over, but I don't think so.
No. Larry was just the broker. They have ways of doing things that are just incredible. People would never, ever even imagine the way they can do away with people.
Yeah.
And make it look totally accidental.
Yeah.
And this comes from your military buildup. A lot of these things that they're doing are basically straight out of Hitler. When they went into Germany and they'd confiscate the records where they were doing these experiments when Hitler had it, they're doing the exact same thing now.
Right out of the book, almost.
They're just following in their footsteps.
Yeah. Noreen, when she came on the program, she inferred that there was a place in Colorado here where I am that they had safe houses where they took these kids to. Have you ever heard anything about Colorado, and can you tell me where in Colorado some of these places might be?
I can't tell you exactly where. I do still have notes and pictures that are still available. They are in a very safe place.
Yeah.
Or actually places. There are 3 of us who know about it. One of them I trust completely. The other one I'm starting to wonder about. But I do not feel safe in getting them.
Is this international, or is this just something that's locally restricted to Nebraska or the United States?
It's definitely not Nebraska. And it goes well beyond just the United States. It was basically white slave trade, where the people would come over and bid on people. There were some of them that I had heard went to Saudi Arabia and some of the Arabic countries over there. I've tried to keep away from politics and that since this happened. The less I know, the better.
Right.
I knew of a couple dozen.
Couple dozen.
Yeah.
Okay. And, of course, it would be fair to say, too, that these are people that are maybe in key positions of the government.
Oh, yes. Very key positions. You're talking congressmen, senators, and above.
Yeah.
People who have money and wealth and power look at things in a different light than the normal person does. They're never quite satisfied with anything. It's always got to be bigger, better, faster, different, especially different.
Do you have any kind of feel for the involvement of this criminal enterprise with drugs, guns, any kind of terrorism?
Well, it helped fund the Iran-Contras. Personally, I strongly believe that the American government did 9/11. There's various facts in that are available now that show that this was directly linked to the Bushes. It was a way for them to get a building taken down. It was a way for him to create a war. Most people are spoon-fed by the media, so much so, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, that they have such a political slant on everything. It's like these reporters that are embedded with the troops. Everything they do and say is censored before it is let out.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't swing the way that they want it to swing, it gets killed.
Did you know Troy Boner?
Yes, I did.
What happened to him? I understand he died.
He died.
You know why?
It was under very, very strange causes. He had went to a mental hospital saying that there was people after him, and he was discredited. He ended up dying shortly after that.
I heard it was a drug overdose at a rehab center.
Yeah.
Do you think he was murdered?
I very strongly believe so.
Because he seemed like, that Conspiracy of Silence video kind of circulates around the internet, and I've seen that. And, of course, he was one of the major contributors to information in that video, and he sounded to me like he was really plugged into what was going on.
Did you know that video was to have aired on Discovery Channel?
Right.
They had it in TV Guide and everything.
Right.
20 minutes before it was to air, the Bush family bought it off and killed it.
Really?
Yes. They've done everything you can think of to me. They've thrown me in prison. They've put me in solitary, the whole bit. And everybody who's associated with this seems to be dropping dead one way or another.
So how many people you got a body count? How many people have died from this?
I think there's around a dozen.
Really?
Say that I have known, and a lot of these aren't publicized. One kid just happened to have got out in front of a cement truck.
Really?
That just don't really happen.
No.
And the thing is, with this mind control bit, people don't understand it. They can just hear a tone or a certain word or phrase, and they will go turn into basically a totally different person.
Mm-hmm.
They can get them to do things that a normal person would never even consider.
Yeah.
People don't realize is how easily they can manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
They can get somebody to where they will drive a car up and have a bomb in it, or fly the plane into the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
I wake up every morning or go to bed every night wondering if the FBI or somebody's going to come kick my door in.
Yeah.
No matter where I go, they know right where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, Rusty, I want to thank you for coming on the air, telling your story.
Well, thank you.
And let's definitely stay in touch, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
All right, you take care. Let's start by, first of all, talking a little bit about you, your background. You're a professional photographer.
Ended up in Omaha, went to a bar called the Mac. Probably get me a job as a waiter or something like that. Lo and behold, the man was Larry King. I had no idea who he was. It was just a whirlwind. He had all this money and power. And within a couple days, I was off on a private jet.
When you say important people, Rusty, are you talking about political?
It went all the way up to the White House. These people were leaders of industry. They were doing things that I did not feel was right. Who would you go tell? Because they pulled the puppet strings. There was one instance where Colonel Michael Aquino came to a motel room, and he got from Larry King a suit where they'd really not be missed. He also cataloged kids. He'd pick them to order.
Okay. It became known popularly as the Franklin Coverup, and Senator John DeCamp, a state senator in Nebraska, was on the banking committee, as was Senator Lauren Schmidt. This started out as a banking investigation into the Franklin Credit Union, which was being directed at the time by a man named Larry King, not the Larry King of talk show fame, but a gentleman who apparently was very big in Republican politics, not only at the state level, but he sang at the inauguration of I think it was Reagan, wasn't it?
It was 1984 and 88.
84 and 88. And he was also head of the Black Republican Caucus. This guy was a mover and shaker.
Case, and it was filled with bearer bonds and cash. There was millions of dollars in that thing. It was for the Iran-Contras. Embassy Row in Washington, D.C. They had parties there. On the surface, they looked like all up and up. Then the party was over with, and there'd be a few guys that would stay after. They would have a sex party. This was at King's house.
Okay. How could this man afford Learjets, lavish parties, and also renting a mansion on Embassy Row in D.C.? He
would prime client. Prey would be a better word for it. Mm-hmm. They went to this church and hit him up for $1.8 million. Well, there was a set of nuns that he got a bunch of money from. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really made me worry about how to get out was the fact that I'd seen Robert Wadman.
He was the chief of the Omaha Police Department.
Yes.
Wadman was pretty deeply involved in abuse of the kids, was he not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the girls that he frequented was Alicia Owen.
Okay. I do remember that Alicia Owen's allegation was that Chief Wadman had made her pregnant.
He covered up so much stuff. You know, Larry flew little kids all over the country for people to be sex toys for people with perverse needs.
You know, I heard that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 80 people.
He got kids from all over the country. A lot of them came from Boys Town or orphanages or places to where $1 million. There was Boys Town and various other organizations. Everybody doesn't know what goes on at Boys Town.
As I recall, Rusty, the Boys Town was one of King's primary recruiting grounds for young boys and girls.
Very much so. I believe the man who's running it now is Father Val Peter. Mm-hmm. Not a good choice.
Okay. Why is that?
He was up to his elbows in this. What they were doing is providing sexual favors to
whoever had money or political influence.
Whoever King told them to. Usually it was done for the purpose of compromising somebody. Mm-hmm. It didn't take me very long to figure out that they had two sets of books going. Mm-hmm. I knew that was wrong.